The detective was supposed to make Lee Remick a superstar. Instead, it nearly destroyed her. One scene went so wrong that people laughed when they should have cried. But that's not even half the story. Now, the dark truth emerges about the failed marriage she kept secret, the movie role that destroyed her reputation, and the tragic reason she disappeared from Hollywood at the height of her fame. Lee Remick was born on December 14, 1935, in Quincy, Massachusetts. Her father, Frank Edwin Remick, was a Harvard-educated businessman who ran a family-owned department store. Her mother, Gertrude Margaret, was an actress who had a deep love for the performing arts. Lee also had an older brother named Bruce. Her family roots traced back to both Ireland and England, with her maternal great-grandmother, Eliza Duffield, being an English preacher. Her childhood took a difficult turn when she was 7. Her parents divorced, and her mother moved with her and Bruce to New York City. Leaving behind the familiarity of Quincy was not easy, but New York opened up a world of new possibilities. Her mother, determined to give her the best education, enrolled her at Miss Hewitt's classes, an elite private school on Manhattan's Upper East Side. At the same time, Lee began training in ballet at the Swoboda School of Dance under Maria Swoboda, a former Bolshoi ballet dancer. She also studied modern dance with Charles Weidman and took classes in acting and theatrical design. For a long time, ballet was her greatest passion. She was serious about it, dedicated to perfecting every movement. But as she got older, her interests began to shift. The stage itself, not just dance, started calling to her. By her mid-teens, she was attending auditions and performing in summer stock theater productions on Cape Cod. These experiences gave her a taste of professional acting and strengthened her love for performing. In 1952, when she was 16 or 17, she saw an advertisement for dancers at the Music Circus in Hyannis, Massachusetts. She wanted the job, but there was one problem: she was too young. That didn't stop her. She lied about her age and was hired, performing in 10 different shows over 10 weeks. The work was intense, but it was also the experience she had been waiting for. Just a year later, at 18, she made her Broadway debut in Be Your Age, a comedy, co-written by Reginald Denham and Mary Orr. It should have been an exciting moment, but it came with unexpected challenges. Her school had strict rules that prohibited students from participating in professional productions. She had broken those rules, and the administration had to decide whether she could remain enrolled. After much debate, they allowed her to stay, though it was clear she had taken a major risk. The play itself didn't last long. It closed after only 5 performances. But those 5 nights changed everything. The show led her to an agent, which meant more auditions and bigger opportunities. After graduating from Miss Hewitt's classes, in 1953, she enrolled at Barnard College in Manhattan. She wanted to stay close to New York's theater scene while continuing her education, but balancing college and acting was overwhelming. One of her professors gave her a piece of advice she couldn't ignore. She had to choose between school and acting. She couldn't do both. She made her decision after just 1 semester. She left Barnard to pursue acting full-time. It was a gamble, but it paid off. With her talent, training, and determination, she was ready to take on the industry. Lee Remick stepped into Hollywood with a face in the crowd in 1957. She was just 21 when she played Betty Lou Fleckham, a high school majorette with a mix of innocence and allure. The role wasn't big, but it was unforgettable. To prepare, she arrived on set 3 weeks early and trained with real majorettes in Arkansas. That dedication showed even in her first film. Directed by Elia Kazan, A Face in the Crowd was a sharp critique of media manipulation. It introduced Andy Griffith in his film debut as the charismatic but ruthless Lonesome Rhodes. Patricia Neal played the woman who discovered him. Though the movie wasn't a hit at the time, critics later recognized its brilliance. Remick's character, a teenager who falls for Rhodes and even marries him, had to balance naivety with a quiet intensity. She pulled it off with ease. Kazan first noticed her on the TV show Robert Montgomery Presents and knew she had something special. That was how she made the leap from television to film. Though Hollywood quickly labeled her a honey-haired beauty, she wanted more than just glamorous roles. She had depth, and she was ready to prove it. In 1958, she took on The Long Hot Summer, directed by Martin Ritt. The film, based on William Faulkner's stories, starred Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, and Orson Welles. Remick played Eula Varner, the lively wife of Jodie Varner, played by Anthony Franciosa. Even with such a powerhouse cast, she stood out. Eula wasn't just another Southern belle. Remick gave her charm, wit, and a spark that made her more than just a background character. Filming took place in Clinton, Louisiana. Orson Welles, already a legend, had a dominating presence on set. Remick later admitted she felt intimidated by him, but instead of letting it shake her, she used that nervous energy to fuel her performance. Tension ran high behind the scenes, especially between Welles and director Martin Ritt. The two clashed over creative decisions, making the production difficult. But when the film was released, it was a triumph. It brought Ritt's career back to life after he had been blacklisted in Hollywood, and it cemented Remick's place as an actress capable of holding her own among Hollywood's biggest stars. Then came 1959 and the film that changed everything for her, Anatomy of a Murder, directed by Otto Preminger. The courtroom drama pushed boundaries and tackled subjects Hollywood rarely touched. Remick played Laura Manion, a woman whose husband, played by Ben Gazzara, is on trial for killing the man accused of raping her. James Stewart starred as the defense attorney trying to unravel the case. Laura Manion was one of the most complicated roles of Remick's early career. She wasn't a typical victim. She was confident, playful, and undeniably sensual. That made audiences uncomfortable. In the 1950s, women in her position were expected to behave a certain way: demure, broken, tragic. But Laura challenged that image. She wore tight sweaters, carried herself with confidence, and never fit into a simple stereotype. That complexity made her one of the most talked-about characters of the year. The film itself was controversial. It openly discussed rape, contraception, and sexual violence, topics that had been nearly off-limits in Hollywood. Some cities even banned it because of its explicit dialogue. But the controversy only made it more of a success. It earned 7 Academy Award nominations and is now considered one of the greatest courtroom dramas ever made. For Remick, Anatomy of a Murder was a turning point. She had already proved she was more than just a beautiful face, but this role showed she could take on characters with depth and emotional weight. In Wild River, 1960, she played Carol Garth Baldwin, a young widow trying to hold on to her family's land while the government pushed for modernization. The film, set in the 1930s during President Roosevelt's New Deal, explored the emotional cost of progress. Directed by Elia Kazan, it told a story of love, loss, and the battle between tradition and change. Remick gave Carol a quiet strength, making her one of the most compelling characters in the film. She balanced Carol's growing relationship with Montgomery Clift's character Chuck Glover against the larger social struggle happening around them. Critics praised her performance for its honesty and emotional depth. But Wild River struggled at the box office. Its political themes overshadowed the personal story at its core. Over time, though, the film found new life. In 2002, it was added to the National Film Registry, securing its place as a classic. Next year, Remick took on one of her most daring roles in Sanctuary, 1961. She played Temple Drake, a privileged Southern belle whose life spirals into darkness. Based on William Faulkner's novel, the film softened some of the book's most disturbing elements but kept its gothic intensity. Temple's story was unsettling, forcing audiences to watch as she became entangled in a twisted relationship with the man who assaulted her. Remick played the role with a mix of fragility and defiance, showing Temple's internal conflict in a way that felt painfully real. The film itself received mixed reviews. Some critics felt it relied too much on shock value, but many agreed that Remick's performance stood out. She brought depth to a character that could have easily been one-dimensional. Despite this, the role did little to change how Hollywood saw her. Throughout her career, Remick struggled with the way studios marketed her. She was often compared to Brigitte Bardot, presented as a sex symbol rather than a serious actress. This frustrated her. She saw herself as an artist, not just a beautiful face. In films like Anatomy of a Murder, 1959, studios focused more on her allure than her acting skills. She fought against these labels, taking on roles that challenged her and proved she was more than just a glamorous screen presence. Her performance in Days of Wine and Roses, 1962, was a turning point. The film, directed by Blake Edwards, told the story of a young couple destroyed by alcoholism. Remick played Kirsten Arneson Clay, a secretary who falls in love with Joe Clay, played by Jack Lemmon. At first, their life together is full of excitement and promise, but their drinking turns from a social habit into a destructive force neither of them can control. Remick's work in the film earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Critics praised her performance for being honest and deeply affecting. Many called it one of the most powerful portrayals of addiction ever seen on screen. Lemmon's role attracted a lot of attention since he was known for comedy and was now proving himself as a serious, dramatic actor. But Remick's performance was just as important. She made Kirsten's transformation feel painfully real, starting as a bright and hopeful young woman before losing herself to alcohol. In the beginning, Kirsten doesn't drink at all. She prefers chocolate over alcohol, a small but telling detail. Then Joe introduces her to Brandy Alexander. It seems harmless at first, just a sweet cocktail. But soon she needs alcohol to get through the day. The shift happens slowly at first. She drinks to feel closer to Joe, then she drinks because she wants to, not because he offers. Before long, she is dependent on it. One of the most heartbreaking moments in the film shows Kirsten desperately searching their apartment for a hidden bottle. Her hands tremble. Her face is frantic. It's a moment that captures just how far she has fallen. Behind the scenes, Remick worked hard to make Kirsten's journey feel real. She reportedly felt overshadowed by Lemmon, whose character had a more dominant role in the story. But she knew how important it was to show Kirsten's side of the struggle. The film took a bold approach to alcoholism at a time when Hollywood rarely explored the subject so honestly. Some preview audiences were shocked. They expected something lighter from Lemmon and Edwards, but the film refused to soften the harsh reality of addiction. Some people even walked out of early screenings, unable to handle what they were watching. Despite the initial reaction, Days of Wine and Roses became a landmark film, and Remick's performance remains unforgettable. It proved she could take on complex roles and make them feel painfully real. She had already impressed audiences in Anatomy of a Murder, 1959, and Wild River, 1960, but this role elevated her career. It was the kind of performance that stays with people long after the credits roll. Lee Remick took on many challenging roles in her career, but The Detective, 1968, pushed her into uncomfortable territory. Starring alongside Frank Sinatra, she played Karen Leland, the troubled wife of his character, Joe Leland. The film tackled heavy themes like police corruption and homophobia, but Karen's storyline felt out of place. Instead of adding depth, it became a distraction, turning her character into a scandal rather than a meaningful part of the story. Karen was portrayed as a woman struggling with what the film called nymphomania, a term often used in the 1960s to sensationalize female characters rather than explore their struggles with any real depth. The way the film handled her storyline drew criticism. Some felt it reduced her to a subplot that did little beyond adding controversy. Instead of tying her struggles into the film's broader themes, her scenes felt disconnected, taking attention away from the main story. One particular scene caused an unexpected reaction. During an intimate moment between Remick and Sinatra, the camera lingered on her body in a way that felt more exploitative than artistic. What was meant to be a dramatic shot instead drew laughter from audiences who found it awkward rather than impactful. The scene was supposed to add tension, but instead it exposed a disconnect between what the filmmakers intended and how people actually responded. Remick was reportedly unhappy with how her character was handled. She had taken on the role expecting a complex, layered part, but much of her screen time focused on moments that felt unnecessary. Critics at the time pointed out the imbalance. The film dealt with bold themes, yet Karen's story felt shallow in comparison. Still, Remick's performance stood out. She brought vulnerability to a role that could have been one-dimensional. Even with the controversy surrounding The Detective, she managed to elevate the material, proving once again that she could make even a flawed script feel compelling. But the film was another example of how female characters were often misused in Hollywood during the 1960s, prioritized for shock value rather than meaningful storytelling. 3 years earlier, she faced a different kind of challenge in Baby. The Rain Must Fall, 1965. This time the struggle wasn't just with the script, it was behind the scenes as well. The film, directed by Robert Mulligan and based on Horton Foote's play The Traveling Lady, told the story of Georgette Thomas, played by Remick, as she tried to rebuild her life with her husband Henry, played by Steve McQueen. Henry had just been released from prison, but his volatile nature made their future uncertain. The film explored themes of redemption, abuse, and survival, but not everyone on set agreed on how to portray Georgette's character. Remick wanted Georgette to feel real. She didn't want her to be just another suffering wife with no depth. But the producers had a different idea. They wanted her character to be more passive, less complicated. Remick pushed back, insisting that Georgette needed to have strength, not just sadness. These creative differences created tension behind the scenes, adding to an already difficult production. Filming in Texas came with its own set of problems. The weather was brutal, with intense heat and sudden windstorms constantly interrupting shoots. One scene had to be filmed over and over again because of shifting wind speeds, which led to continuity errors that even made it into the final cut. The entire production was a challenge, testing the patience of both cast and crew. Despite everything, Remick delivered a performance that critics praised for its warmth and emotional depth. She brought a quiet resilience to Georgette that balanced McQueen's more brooding performance. Many felt that without her, the film would have been too bleak, but her presence gave it heart. Lee Remick's journey through Hollywood was never simple. She wanted roles that had depth, but the industry often pushed her in the opposite direction. Some projects felt like a step forward, others felt like a trap. One of the worst experiences of her career came in 1965 with The Hallelujah Trail. The film was meant to be a grand Western comedy. John Sturges, known for The Magnificent Seven, directed it. The cast included Burt Lancaster and Jim Hutton. The movie ran nearly 3 hours and tried to be a satire of epic westerns, but something went wrong. The script was filled with forced humor, and the tone was all over the place. Instead of being clever, the film felt like an exhausting mess. Remick played Cora Templeton Massengale, a temperance leader trying to stop a whiskey wagon train from reaching Denver. On paper, the role had potential. It should have been a strong character. Instead, she became a caricature. Critics were brutal. One called the movie an asinine bore. The production was just as difficult as the final product. Bad weather slowed everything down. There were constant delays. A stuntman even lost his life during filming. After the movie flopped at the box office, Remick felt humiliated. She regretted taking the role. She had always wanted meaningful characters, and this was the exact opposite. But at the time, she thought it was a safe choice. It wasn't. It became a painful lesson about Hollywood's unpredictability. She wasn't willing to make the same mistake twice. That's why she turned down The Jean Harlow Story, a big studio project that could have made her an even bigger star. Fox wanted her to play Jean Harlow in a flashy biopic, but she refused. She read the script and hated it. It focused too much on scandal and ignored Harlow's real life and career. It was a risky decision. Many actresses would have taken the B role without question, but Remick wasn't interested in being typecast. She wanted roles that felt real. Turning down the Jean Harlow Story meant walking away from money and publicity. It also meant proving she wouldn't compromise her values for fame. In 1966, she got a chance to prove her talent in a way that Hollywood rarely allowed. She returned to Broadway and took on one of the most demanding roles of her career, Wait Until Dark. Directed by Arthur Penn, it was a tense thriller that kept audiences on edge. She played Susie Hendricks, a blind woman who becomes the target of violent criminals. It was a complex role that required intense preparation. She didn't just rely on guesswork. She worked with professionals from the Lighthouse Foundation for the Blind to make sure her performance was accurate. It wasn't enough to act blind. She wanted to understand the movements and instincts of someone who couldn't see. The play opened on February 2, 1966 at the Ethel Barrymore Theater. Critics praised her performance. She brought both vulnerability and strength to Susie, making every scene feel real. The play became a hit, running for 374 performances. Her work earned her a Tony nomination for Best Actress, but live theater came with its own challenges. Performing the same role night after night took a toll. By the end of the run, she admitted that her mind would sometimes drift while delivering lines. She would think about errands or personal matters while still giving a flawless performance. That was the nature of long Broadway runs. Even great actors had to fight against routine. Despite the exhaustion, Wait Until Dark became one of the defining moments of her career. It proved she could handle anything: Hollywood, Broadway, thrillers, dramas. She had fought for better roles, and this time the risk had paid off. Lee Remick's career took a fascinating turn in the 1970s as film roles for women became harder to find. She moved into television and delivered some of her most powerful performances. In 1974, she starred in Jenny, Lady Randolph. Churchill, a 7-part British miniseries about Winston Churchill's mother, Jenny Jerome. The series followed Jenny's life from her early years in America to her influential role in British high society. Produced by Thames Television, it was a sweeping historical drama that required Remick to portray Jenny from age 18 to 67. She brought warmth, elegance, and complexity to the role, earning a Golden Globe and a BAFTA TV Award for Best Actress. She also received an Emmy nomination, proving she could carry a project of this scale with grace and authority. When the series aired in the US on PBS as part of Great Performances, critics praised its historical accuracy and lavish production. The New York Times called Remick's performance a mixture of actress and characterization that is most attractive. She didn't look much like Jenny Jerome, but that didn't matter. She captured Jenny's charm and determination, making her feel real. This project marked a turning point. Film wasn't offering the kind of roles she wanted, but television was beginning to tell bigger, more ambitious stories. Remick saw the opportunity and took it. Around the same time, she starred in 2 groundbreaking miniseries that helped shape the future of television: The Blue Knight, 1973, and QB7, 1974. These weren't just TV movies, they were early examples of long-form storytelling that paved the way for the prestige dramas of later decades. In The Blue Knight, based on Joseph Wambaugh's novel, she played Cassie Walters, the love interest of William Holden's character, an aging LAPD officer nearing retirement. The 4-part series explored themes of justice and morality in urban policing. Holden won an Emmy for his performance, but Remick's portrayal of Cassie was just as strong. She gave the character depth, making her more than just a supporting figure in the story. QB7, based on Leon Uris's best-selling novel, was an even bigger project. The 6.5-hour miniseries starred Anthony Hopkins and Ben Gazzara and told a gripping story about Holocaust atrocities and a high-stakes libel trial. Remick played Lady Margaret, bringing quiet strength to a role that added emotional weight to the drama. The series won 7 Emmy Awards and became a major success, proving that television could handle serious, complex stories on a grand scale. Then, in 1976, she took on something completely different: The Omen, directed by Richard Donner. It was unlike anything she had done before. Horror wasn't her usual genre, but this film was more than just scares. It was a psychological thriller that tapped into deep fears about fate and evil. Remick played Catherine Thorne, the adoptive mother of Damien, a child who may or may not be the Antichrist. Opposite Gregory Peck, she delivered a performance filled with tenderness, fear, and quiet desperation. The film became a massive hit, grossing over $60 million in the US, which would be around $334 million today. It was one of the highest-grossing films of the year and launched a franchise that would continue for decades. Meanwhile, Lee Remick's personal life was filled with success and struggle, love and loss. On August 3, 1957, she married television producer Bill Colleran. He was well known in the industry, working on The Dean Martin Show, Your Hit Parade, and The Judy Garland Show. Their life together seemed promising. 2 years later, on January 27, 1959, they welcomed their first child, Catherine. Their son, Matthew, was born on June 7, 1961. Remick was becoming one of Hollywood's most sought-after actresses, but she always made time for her children. While many stars got lost in the glamour of the industry, she stayed focused on family. She even took on more stage work during the mid-1960s, so she could spend less time away from home. But balancing marriage, motherhood, and a demanding career wasn't easy. Her relationship with Colleran began to suffer. His work as a producer kept him busy, and Remick's rising fame added more strain. By the time she earned an Academy Award nomination for Days of Wine and Roses in 1962, their marriage was already under pressure. Years passed, and the distance between them grew. By the mid-1960s, it was clear they were no longer the same couple who had married a decade earlier. They officially divorced in 1968 after 11 years together. The breakup was painful, but Remick remained focused on her children. She refused to let Hollywood take over their lives, shielding them from the pressures that came with fame. Not long after, she found love again. In 1969, while working on the film Hard Contract, she met British producer Kip Gowans. He had experience working on major films like Darling, 1965, Far from the Madding Crowd, 1967, and The Lion in Winter, 1968. Something about him felt different. They married on December 18, 1970, and this time, Remick found the balance she had been looking for. They split their time between England and Osterville, Massachusetts, a place Remick called her true home. The slower pace there gave her a sense of peace. She continued acting, but chose roles that mattered to her. Gowans supported her career, and together they worked on several television films, including The Women's Room, 1980, The Letter, 1982, Rearview Mirror, 1984, and Of Pure Blood, 1986. Their marriage lasted until the end of her life. Then, in 1989, everything changed. While filming in France, Remick started feeling unusually tired. At first, she thought it was just the flu, but the exhaustion didn't go away. After a chest X-ray and a CAT scan, doctors found tumors in her kidneys and lung. The diagnosis was devastating. The cancer was advanced, and the tumors in her lungs were inoperable. She refused to give up. She turned to immunotherapy, a treatment designed to strengthen her body's natural defenses. It wasn't easy. The side effects were painful. She endured 2 rounds of the treatment, each lasting a week. But she kept fighting. In July 1989, she underwent surgery to remove one of her kidneys, hoping it would slow the disease. For a while, there was hope. By 1990, her cancer went into remission. She even returned to acting for a brief time, believing she had beaten the odds. But the relief didn't last. The cancer came back later that year, more aggressive than before. By mid-1991, there were no more treatment options left. She decided to stop medical interventions and spend her final months in peace, surrounded by family. On April 29, 1991, she made her last public appearance. Hollywood honored her with a star on the Walk of Fame. Even though she was visibly weak, she stood with grace. About 150 fans gathered to celebrate her, some holding signs that read, "We love you, Lee." Close friends Jack Lemmon and James Iard Stewart attended, paying tribute to her career and the person she was beyond the screen. Lemmon, who had worked with her on Days of Wine and Roses, called her one of the finest actresses I have ever known. Just 2 months later, on July 2, 1991, she passed away at her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. She was 55 years old. She had chosen to spend her final moments in comfort, surrounded by those who loved her. Her funeral brought together some of Hollywood's biggest names, including Elizabeth Taylor and Gregory Peck. Jack Lemmon delivered a moving eulogy, remembering not only her talent, but also the kindness and strength she showed throughout her illness. Her children honored her memory by singing "Anyone Can Whistle," a song from one of her Broadway performances. From her triumphs to her tragedies, Lee Remick's story is one you won't want to miss. Subscribe now to stay updated on more gripping tales from the world of classic cinema. Let's keep the legacy of these incredible artists alive together.